I don't know who made Teen Titans Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we can get them to Teen Titans Go to the polls.
Like button!
Smash the like button.
In the first part of this video series, we finished up by talking about why, out of all the episodes in Season 1 of Teen Titans, I like the 6th one best. However, there are other good episodes, and Episode 7 is definitely a gooder. But before we get to that, it's a good idea to talk about the order of the episodes in Season 1 because there was a lot of confusion over that in the comments, and I really don't blame people for that. Because before making this video, I noticed some discrepancies online with the episodes, so I looked into it a bit and found out that on the DVD releases of Teen Titans, the order is the same as the order I discussed them in, so I took that to be the official order. That being said, the broadcast of the show was different in that episode 1 and 3 were switched around, so the show started with these brats coming in and taking the tower from the Teen Titans. The reason I chose to go through the episodes in the DVD release order is because of how these episodes are structured. While I think that the first episode where Robin and Cyborg get in an argument is really bad and not a good first episode, and while I think that episode 3 would have been a better first episode even though it still wouldn't have been a great one, the episode where Robin and Cyborg argue has this section where each of the Titans leaps in dynamically announcing their number in the group. It definitely seems like the writers were using this as a pretty typical introduction to these characters, and it doesn't feel like something that would happen in episode 3 of the series when we've already seen them a bunch. So this led me to go with the DVD's order, as it seemed more likely that this was the creator's intended order. So now that we've clarified that nobody's crazy here, and you likely did actually see that third episode first, let's move on to episode 7. As I said last time, when we don't know too much about characters, it's generally better to focus on more extreme personalities in the group first. Now we are getting a bit further along in the story, and we are also getting more well acquainted with each of our heroes, but so far I think Starfire and Raven have received the best development. For Starfire, this is because she's such a simple character, so it's easy to go, yep, I get it, and to move on from there. With Raven, it's because her surface is so easy to understand, but what lies beneath that is surprisingly complex. So both of these characters are heavy on surface elements that let us know a lot about them right off the bat, even just maybe from looking at them, but these surface elements are about as different as you can get, and opposites tend to make great duos. This is certainly the case here. This episode and the previous episode are most conceptually sound of all the first season's episodes. For the most part, this is due to the fact that they're creative with how they get characters to develop, and choose to move outside of simple conversations, misunderstandings, and grievances to delve into more interesting scenarios. In this episode, Raven and Starfire end up switching bodies and have to work together to save their teammates from the Puppet King. Because Raven's powers require extremely good control of her emotions to use properly, and Starfire's require the use of emotion, the characters need to quickly change something fundamental about their personalities. There are a couple interesting things about this. First, we know that to some degree these characters' powers have shaped who they are, that they aren't just simple abilities that are outside of their personalities and that they just happen to have. Raven needs to act this way. She needs to meditate and control herself despite the fact that she has many unbridled emotions under the surface. So her meditation, aloofness, and apathy aren't just something the show brushes off with a, oh, that's just how she is. She has no choice but to act that way, at least to a certain degree. And although Starfire's power has less obvious and less extreme ramifications for her, her personality has similarly been shaped by her powers. I love when superhero stories do this sort of thing, when they make the powers something limiting as well as something that's, well, powerful. Having these characters switch bodies forces two stubborn characters to change who they are in a short period of time. So development that would regularly feel overly rushed ends up having a pretty natural pace to it. Here, point A and B for Raven and Starfire are very different from one another, and it shows both at the end of this episode and in later episodes. This is also a better conflict than those we saw in most of the earlier episodes, if not all of the earlier episodes besides episode 6. Here, Robin, Beast Boy, and Cyborg could lose their bodies forever in some sort of occultic ceremony. It's actually pretty messed up. But because they manage to work well under stress, when their personalities are able to complement one another's without either of them changing so much that it feels unreasonable, the emotional moments feel genuine and deserved. At the beginning of this episode, Starfire simply interrupted Raven and Raven simply shot down her ideas. At the end, there's a small but emotional moment when Starfire quiets down and meditates with Raven, and Raven asks Starfire if she wants to go to the mall. Because the show earned this through its concept, execution, and dialogue, I felt something. Instead of this being as cheesy as some of the previous episode's messages. This episode may actually be closer to episode 6 than I originally thought now that I've written it all out, but the main point here is just that it's good. Unfortunately, episode 8 isn't as strong. Basically, the arc of this episode involves Beast Boy overcoming his pride by working with Aqualad. In concept, this is a pretty good arc because it involves a genuine change in Beast Boy that coincides with him needing to do something external. So we don't see him just sitting around and talking the whole episode about this problem. He can grow as a character and be involved in action at the same time. This episode also does something interesting with this idea that working alone isn't all the best, as the villain makes clones of himself, but ultimately, the clones fight among themselves and destroy each other. This works as a more concrete, physical version of what Beast Boy was doing. When he wouldn't work properly with others because of his pride, he was only harming his own ability to reach his potential and to win this fight. More of the same can't beat different people working together. I do wish that these explorations of Beast Boy's character were less on the nose and in your face. Fortunately, I have a bit more to say about episode 9, and it is overall a better episode than the 8th one, even if it doesn't quite reach episode 6 and 7's level of quality. Here, after being defeated by Slade, Robin chooses to disguise himself as a villain, Red X, so he can get closer to Slade, and eventually even hurts his own friends so that he can do this. Here we see Robin's biggest character flaw, and a flaw that is very much in opposition with the nicest part of his personality. When the going gets tough, he's unwilling to accept others' help and chooses to rely almost entirely on himself, going so far as to even manipulate his friends into following his plan without telling them what that plan is because he doesn't trust them enough. Of course, Slade knows what Robin is doing this whole time, and Robin has really just played right into Slade's hand. Because of this, he ends up getting compared to Slade a lot, and he's very sensitive about the fact that he might be similar to him. Now, all of this is good, except for continually talking about how Robin is similar to Slade. That's not a very fair comparison for a number of reasons, and the show seems to want to legitimize the idea, considering that Robin's friends and Slade see that in him. The most important problem with this idea is that we don't know who Slade is. All he is, everything he is, boils down to the idea that he wants Robin to be his apprentice, and that he's incredibly manipulative too. Every plan he's enacted so far in this series has involved this. But beyond that, what sort of villain is he? What was he before Robin? Now I understand that there are many more seasons of this show left, and that it's hardly a good idea to feed us all the information about the villain in season 1, but we need something. Personally, I believe that the first episode, or at least an episode close to the beginning of the series, should have involved Slade carrying out a plan that didn't involve Robin, that showed us something about his character on its own, and then Robin and the rest of the Titans could have tried to stop him, and when Robin puts up a good fight, that's when Slade could have become obsessed with him, and then that would have made sense that Robin could have started obsessing over Slade too. This would also make their climactic fight more emotional, as we would get to see how far Robin has progressed from episode 1 to 13 based on how he fights Slade specifically. This is also where more detailed character-specific backgrounds for Robin's and Slade's living spaces would have been appreciated. Maybe they could have had a similar way of organizing themselves or something like that. I guess one connection is that both of their living spaces are pretty abstract, but that's not the strongest comparison to draw. It's very, well, vague. As it stands, Slade in this season is really just a villain who is defined by this obsession with Robin. I'm not going to give any ideas for how they could have made Slade and Robin more similar, however, because at this point, I don't know even enough about Slade's character to do that much because, as I said, I haven't watched this series in a very long time and I never even saw the whole thing through. But something definitely should have been altered to legitimize this comparison.
If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding!
All I can think of when I see this guy is the wall and how weird this episode is. I think they did a lot of reruns of this one though, because I saw this one the most as a kid. I do have a theory for why that is though. The strongest aspect of this episode is its creativity in terms of direction and concept. This is some of the best fight scenes in all of the first season, and beyond how the characters look in movement and that sort of thing, it's just a chaotic, fun time. I especially enjoy this Scooby-Doo-esque section where they have a song playing and all the characters are running around. It's a solid song and there's solid visuals. It's just a good time all around. But it's a very strange episode to have here, as is the next episode. In this one, the Teen Titans are kidnapped by Mad Mod, a sort of school teacher madman Tiabu weirdo who is upset with them for fighting crime and wants them to leave the hard-working villains alone. This is where the episodic nature of the first season becomes tricky and problematic because, while I really don't think this is a bad episode on its own, This episode and the next episode create an unnatural gap between the events of episodes 9 and 12. Those episodes, with their focus on Robin's relationship with Slade, all have a specific plot that connects them, and they should have come one after another. Plus, we could have used 2 more episodes to explore Robin and Slade's relationship. It's not like it was delved into all that deeply. Again, this is a case where a reoccurring character is brought in earlier at the expense of Season 1's structure and at the expense of exploring the Robin-Slade dynamic in more detail. And although this episode is fun, at least to me, that character dynamic is far more important and potentially interesting than this guy. The main reason I think this episode exists, though, is to market the show to kids. With its off-the-wall plot, overall humorous ideas, high stakes, and eccentric villain, it's likely to grab a younger person's attention right off the bat. In fact, maybe it wasn't that they aired reruns of this more, maybe it was just that it grabbed my eye when I was going from channel to channel as a kid. In addition to this, there's a message lying underneath all of the other stuff that's very easy to be interpreted by a child as being anti-authority or anti-school or both. And that's likely to be enjoyed by a kid, I think, because, most kids don't like school all that much. The only real way I can find a connection between this and the Robin Slade episodes is to hone in on the fact that Robin saves all the other group members here and fights competently. Maybe we're meant to see how he performs when he's at his best, but we could have also seen that using a conflict with Slade, so overall I still think that this episode was there to mainly market to children. Then episode 11. In this bad boy, Cyborg makes a nice car and then it gets stolen and he's upset. The major focus of this episode is on his and Raven's dynamic. It's not a terrible episode, but it shouldn't be here for the same reason that the last episode shouldn't have been there either. So I won't repeat myself with all of those points because those all stand here too. There are 2 arcs in this episode that I need to go through. The first is that Cyborg starts off hyper-focused on his car to the point where he isn't focusing on what's most important. But by the end of the episode, he's willing to destroy the car to do his job properly. The second arc is Raven's, which is less of an arc within the episode itself and more so showing us the effect Cyborg's actions in episode 6 had on her and capitalizing on that idea of who she is now. Beyond these dynamics, the episode features some nice moments among the group overall, like here where Beast Boy does a drum roll for Cyborg to reveal the car, or where he's got his head out of the window as a dog. It's just nice little touches like this that are sprinkled throughout the episode. But let's really focus on the Cyborg aspect of this. The Cyborg part is handled pretty well in that it shows what it's meant to show. An obsessive teenage boy who is very proud of something he made and is worried about having it damaged or taken away from him. At first, he thinks the thing itself is special, but as Raven is sure to point out to him, the actual special part is that he made it, that he put part of himself into it both literally and symbolically. While I'm not much of a car guy myself, I think that's a good message to communicate to kids. Physical things, even physical things we've put a lot of time into, can get wrecked and destroyed, and they are pretty much never more important than the relationships we have with those who care about us. I'm not a big fan of how cheesy the delivery of this message is, but I can appreciate that. And the reason I think this is so cheesy is in part because of Raven. Because it seems like too much of a jump in character for her to start acting like this, to start spouting off platitudes at Cyborg that are really just meant for the audience. It would have been far more in character for her to just say a few reassuring words or to say this in a less purposefully eloquent and grossly in-your-face way. To just get to the point, I guess. At least that's my perception of her character after these episodes I've seen. And I get that the writers are trying to show a change here, that they're trying to show how much closer she is to Cyborg now that he's helped her with something, but this is a 180-degree change in personality, not a slight change in how she communicates with another human being. As far as I'm concerned, this would have been way more powerfully communicated by just having her come along and try to help Cyborg, only to have him eventually ask her after destroying the car why she came along to help him at all. Then she could have just said something like, well, you care about it and I care about you, but, maybe that's even too much, but I think you get my point. Just something short and sweet and then let her actions do the rest of the work. With that, let's move on to the last 2 episodes where Robin gets manipulated into joining Slade because Slade put a bunch of little nanobot type things in the rest of the Titans' bloodstreams and now he can just kill them at any time. I've already gone into how the Robin-Slade relationship should have been explored more to capitalize on their final fights and on all of this stuff really, so I won't harp on that anymore too much, but know that that criticism is underlying everything I say about these last 2 episodes. To put it simply, these episodes are good despite being built on the cracked foundation Season 1 has created for them. They put Robin in the hardest possible situation for him to encounter, where he needs to fight his own friends, the people he cares about the most, and join the villain. Ultimately, the end of this episode, where Robin purposely gives himself the weird nanobot problem, is the most important part. It shows us 3 important things. First, that Robin cares about his friends more than himself. He's willing to put everything on the line for them, to let himself die for them. Second, it shows how the rest of the Titans are willing to do the same for him, with how they just show up to fight Slade despite knowing that he has this advantage over them and that he can just kill them. Now, that is a stupid thing to do, of course, but hey, they're teenagers. I don't blame them for charging in. The point is that they just care about him that much. Third, we see how extreme Slade's obsession with Robin is. He could kill them all at the end here, but instead, he chooses to let them live because he's so focused on Robin. These are all good things to show us, and they mean that going into the second season, we're coming into this with a pretty solid foundation overall despite my complaints about this season. The Titans are closer than ever, and Slade's obsession is stronger than ever. Overall, with the improved pacing, music direction, and animation, these episodes are a fun ride with incredibly high stakes as things move along. It's a huge improvement across this season that has me excited to see where things are going to go. As I watched this, I slowly started to feel that feeling I'd felt as a kid, to get those same vibes from the show, basically, those same ideas being communicated to me. And by the end of this, I was having a great time kind of reliving those nostalgic feelings and just enjoying it, because there's a lot to enjoy here. And as it moves along, I'm definitely looking forward to enjoying more of it and to talking about more of it. Thank you very much for watching and taking the time out of your day to do so. I want to take a moment to thank all of my patrons over on patreon.com. They are just fantastic, and I have so much gratitude for them. If you want to get notified on when the next part of this is going to be out, remember to subscribe and hit the little bell icon that you got to hit now to get notified. And yeah, I just hope that you have a great day, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below. Bye-bye.